Citizens of Warwick, this is Robert Cushman, the moderator of the online Facebook page called The Taxpayer's Spin. I'm also a former elected official in the city of Warwick, serving as a city councilman and school committee chairman. The purpose of this page is to provide you, the taxpayers of Warwick, with detailed information and analysis related to how the city and school department are run in Warwick. This page will provide you with analysis based on official city documents and information that you will not find through any other media source. If you're not a member of the page, I would really implore you to follow our page and refer the page to your family and friends. Very soon, I predict that Warwick will be engulfed in a major fiscal crisis due to unsustainable spending in the city and school budgets. And with the $350 million borrowing for the two new high schools, property taxes will increase to unsustainable levels. This will result in senior citizens on a fixed income losing their homes and small businesses struggling to stay open. We as citizens of Warwick need to hold our elected officials and bureaucrats accountable for their decisions that affect our everyday lives. We need to demand new rules are put in place that will allow us to question our elected leaders and expose misinformation and disinformation so that we all can better understand what we will be facing regarding the effect these policies will have, not only on our taxes, but on the programs and services being provided in the city and school department. One of the major issues I see in the city is the inability for citizens to interact with their elected officials. City Council President Steve McAllister has been inviting individuals to speak before the council at his own prerogative, not following any specific council rules. The problem with him doing this is that he is also allowing elected officials to come before the council and report on major financial issues without allowing any council member or Warwick taxpayer an opportunity to ask questions. This has led to a one-sided monologue by these officials where what is being presented cannot be fact-checked as true. A perfect example of what I'm talking about occurred at the December 2nd City Council meeting where School Committee Chairman Sean Gallagher was allowed to make an informational presentation only to defend the school department's overspending its salary line item by approximately $6 million in the 2024 budget. Mr. Gallagher was allowed to attack Councilman Ed Lattiser for publicly exposing this deficit in the Warwick Beacon and indirectly attacking this page for a post documenting what was presented by the Warwick School Finance Director at the November School Committee meeting. At that meeting, he not only discussed the 2024 $6 million deficit, but he also discussed a significant deficit occurring in the salary line item in the current fiscal 2025 budget. As a result, the school department has taken drastic measures to cut spending in other areas to try to balance the budget. Mr. Lattiser at the council meeting asked Council President Mr. McAllister if he can ask Mr. Gallagher any questions, and he was denied an opportunity.
Lattiser. Sir, so my question is, will we be allowed, we the council members of the public, will we be allowed to ask questions or have comments from either of the two speakers?
Not at this time.
Mr. Gallagher, knowing that he would not have to answer any questions from Mr. Lattiser or anybody on the Warwick City Council, or for the public for that matter, proceeded to go and attack Mr. Lattiser for pointing out information about the school department.
Unfortunately, one particular elected official has chosen to misrepresent this preliminary document, focusing on a single line item expenditure and taking it out of context.
Mr. Gallagher claiming that the school department did not have a $6 million shortfall in its fiscal 2024 salary line item is an outright lie. And this is what was documented on this page and by Councilman Lattiser. If you look at the line item 5100, there was a shortfall of $5,979,870. This shortfall came from an official document that was presented at the school committee meeting. And you could see this is an excerpt from the document, 5100 subtotal personal services compensation Variance to budget. This is the total adopted budget for fiscal 24, 102.8 million. This is the total expenditure, 108.8. There is a deficit of 5.9, approximately $6 million in that line item. So Mr. Gallagher basically saying that this is taken out of context. This is from his own budget document that shows a approximate $6 million shortfall in this salary line item. So this following clip is from the Warwick School Committee November school committee meeting, where the finance director talks about the deficit in the salary line item.
One of the things I wanted to address tonight, we've talked at previous school committee meetings about being over budget in terms of salaries in prior years and showing that trend. So I just wanted to, I'll read a quick statement about what the administration is doing in order to address this, and then I'm happy to answer any questions afterward. The administration has taken the action of halting discretionary spending through the end of December while we consider a revised district budget for the remainder of the school year. The fiscal year 24 school committee budget allocated $95.4 million for salaries. Through the process of adding programmatic headcount and the expiration of COVID era federal funds, we now know that this amount was far less than the district needed to budget for salaries. While a significant adjustment was made to increase the budget for salaries in the current fiscal year, we anticipate being over budget again in fiscal year 25. In the next several weeks, the administration will be working to achieve the following. Develop a clear projection of exactly how much the district will spend in fiscal year 25 on salaries and benefits. We're going to work with
So I just want to stop right there and just comment that why doesn't the district know what they're going to spend in the fiscal 25 budget? That's the budget year we're in right now. They should have known this. This should have been part of the budget process, and they should have been at least been able to accurately forecast this. So what's happening now is, once again, they overspent in the 2024 by $6 million. That's what we've pointed out. And now they're seeing a trend where they're overspending again in the fiscal 25 budget, where, basically 6 months into the fiscal 25 budget, and they don't know how much more money they're going to be over. So they're taking drastic measures to cut, spending in other areas to try to move that money into the fiscal 25 salary line items. So let's continue what the finance director is saying here.
Budget managers to develop a spending plan for the second half of the year that makes sense from both an operational and fiscal perspective, and present a district recommended revised budget for fiscal year 25 for school committee's consideration and approval that reflects the increased salary and benefit costs, as well as the cuts to discretionary line items.
So I'm going to stop again right here. And I'm going to show you some documentation back when they did the budget hearings in a few minutes that show that the school committee and the administration knew they were going to be having a deficit in the fiscal 25 salary line items way back in April of this year. Now, I want to go back to Mr. Galligan's testimony here, where basically he is talking about comments made by Councilman Lattisaw, and maybe even some of the comments I've put on my taxpayer spin page about the deficit of the school budget and how it's going against the school department's credibility. When, I think it clearly does go against the school department's credibility. Let's listen to what Mr. Galligan had to say.
Unfairly discredit myself, the members of the school committee, our superintendent, and her administrative team. The reported $6 million deficit is not grounded in reality. Here are the facts. Like most municipalities, our business office continues to reconcile FY24 finances. A trial balance was sent to the auditors last week as part of the routine reconciliation process. For FY25, this current fiscal year, we have implemented a freeze on discretionary spending to identify cost-saving measures and achieve a balanced budget, showing
Now, to help better understand what's going on in the fiscal 24 budget and the fiscal 25 budget, what I've done is I've created this spreadsheet. And this spreadsheet basically shows you that this is the fiscal 24 budget, fiscal 25 budget. So every month, the finance director would report to the school department, what the budget is for the salary line items on the year, how much has been expended, the percent that's been expended, and the variance to budget, which means, how much more do they have remaining in that line item. So what I've done to make this a little bit more understandable is I've kind of taken a look at the entire, all these documents that have been provided to the school committee for the entire year. But before I go into 24, because, Mr. Galligan was touching on the fiscal 25, I want to point out something that's very, very significant. On March 28th of 2024, the school department was starting to look at the fiscal 25 budget. They were starting to set it up and see how much they're going to need. And what they forecasted then, and they told the school committee at the March 28th meeting, that there was a potential for a $5.5 million budget deficit in the salaries and compensation line items. And now we jump to the April 23rd meeting where they actually had the school committee meeting to set the budget for the salary line items. And at that meeting, they set it at, I believe it was about $106,788,788. And within that budget hearings, the school administration basically said through a loss of ESSER funds, and I believe these are COVID level federal funds, $6.2 million expenses needed to move to the general fund for fiscal 25. What that means is the school department was anticipating that the salary line items were going to be $6.2 million higher because the federal funds had run out. They were going to still keep those programs in place. So they needed to find a way to increase the salary line items by $6.2 million. They didn't do that. They passed the budget knowing that they had a potential $6.2 million deficit. And now they've finally hit the November meeting, and now they're finding out that we have to take drastic measures and we have to cut all discretionary spending in the fiscal 25 budget because we're going to be way over in the salary line items on the fiscal 25 budget like we are on the fiscal 24 budget. So, what does that mean? I looked at some of the documentation, $1.5 million in supplies. They're looking at that. $884,000 for athletic field repairs at vets. $1.5 million in improvements, building improvements. So they're scrambling again. And this get back to my point that this was never really a balanced budget by the school committee. The actions that they're taking now should have taken place at this April 23rd meeting to actually balance the budget. Or what they should have said is, we're no longer getting these federal funds. We're going to have to cut these programs. They decided not to cut the programs. What they should have done is rebudget money into the salary line items so you don't have this deficit that you're facing right now. Now, what I want to also let's go into the fiscal 24 problem that we're seeing right now. So we're going to jump to May 14, 2024. This is what the budget was, $102,881,000. They expended $77 million or 75%. The next school committee meeting on June 11th, they expended $86 million. The next school committee, this is the end of the fiscal year. So the fiscal year ends on June 30th. At the end of the fiscal year, at the July 9th meeting, the school finance director reported that $98 million were expended, which is 95% of the budget, leaving $4.6 million in a surplus. Now, if you sometimes look at some of the city budgets, the city of Warwick budgets, they usually, when they're reporting their budgets at the end of the fiscal year, they'll have, it's called an encumbrance fund, where there's funds being spent in a future fiscal year, but it applies to that fiscal year. And that's how they can reconcile the amount of money that, is kind of falling within one fiscal year to another. We didn't see that in the school department budget. And here's what happened. All of a sudden, another $8 million is added to the expense budget for the salaries, bringing it up to $106.1 million. and that's 103% of the budget for a $3.2 million. The question is, why didn't you know that $8 million more should have been part of that salary line item that was being spent in that fiscal year? Remember, the fiscal year has expired. It gets worse. On September 11th, $2.4 million is added to the expense of the salary line item, bringing it up to $108.5 million. And that's a 5.53% over. On the October 8th million, nothing new reported. And then finally, on that November 13th meeting, another almost $300,000 reported, which brings the total up to $108.8 million, and that's the $5.9 or $6 million deficit. So the question is, how does all this $10 million in additional money get added to this line item that you did not know about?
Also, to take control of the situation, the school committee has leveraged an expert on municipal finances. We have retained the seasoned municipal finance consultant to assist in reconciling the FY24 finances. This was done before anything became out there and spun.
So here's a question I have. Why do you need to hire someone from outside the district to reconcile your fiscal 24 budget? And what I just showed you in the that spreadsheet where I showed the reporting of the information, where, let me bring that spreadsheet back up, where at the end of the fiscal year, $10 million more was reported in that salary line item. Is this why you're bringing someone in? Should this information have been known sooner than later? I would think so. And so, it sounds like the school department is taking some extraordinary steps to bring in an outside auditor. Now, from what I've heard from my sources, is that this auditor has specific knowledge and has worked within the school department in the finance areas in the past, and they're bringing her back in to look at this. So, what's going on here is should this information have been reported before and it's not being reported, and now you're requiring a outside auditor to come in and take a look at the situation? There's a lot of questions that Mr. Gallagher needs to answer, the school department needs to answer, and you know what? If he would just give us an opportunity to come before a public meeting, maybe we could get some of these questions answered. In conclusion, the school department has taken extraordinary steps to keep the taxpayers from being able to ask questions. The same is taking place with the city council. The result of this is that taxpayers can only look at official city documents that the city council and the school committee have presented and make assumptions based on the information contained in those documents. Let's hope in the future, with new elected officials arriving on the school committee and the city council, that government will become more open and that taxpayers will have an opportunity to question our elected officials.